Greetings. During the medieval period, due to the advancement in printing technology and industrial revolutions, the church had grown on the one side. On the other side, within the church or within the Latin church, there were many wrongdoings happened. So, there was a great need of purifying, reforming the church at every level. The Renaissance Pope or the Pope of that time lived more like secular princes than like spiritual leaders. Their personal lives were sometimes scandalous, and their positions as rulers involved them into warfare, and their projects like constructing huge temple or churches made them to enter into corruptions. For example, St. Peter's Basilica was one of the major projects took place during that time. To construct huge church, the sale of indulgence was introduced. So that was questioned by many intellectuals and theologians who were living and leading a life, very simple life in the mendicant orders. And there were some individuals and some groups questioned the authority of Pope and the practices that happened within the church as unbiblical. To name few, Bernard of Clairvaux, John of Paris, Dante Alighieri, William of Ockham, John Wycliffe, John Huss, and those Savonarola, and those were the people who were individually tried bringing reformation within the church in their locality. So these individuals can be called as forerunners of reformation. For example, John Wycliffe began to translate the New Testament into English, but that was not accepted by the church or authority or Pope. He was punished and put to death. He was burned alive. In spite of all, they thought that the church must be renewed. In the same spirit, there were different groups: Albigensians, spirituals, Walderians. Like them, there are different groups questioned the evil happenings that were within the church, that are found within the church, and they wanted to reform the church of their countries. At this juncture, God used reformatory thinkers like Martin Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and brought reformation. The basic issue of the sale of papal plenary indulgence. Indulgence means transfer of merits to obtain forgiveness of sins for the dead and the living. And that was sold by the church. So that was questioned by these reformatory thinkers. Martin Luther was from Germany, and he nailed 95 statements or theses or questions against the church authority, Pope, and the evil practices or unbiblical practices that are happening within the church. There was monopoly of language, only Latin Bible was circulated and only the priest can understand, the people could not. So, misbehavior, misinterpretation took place. And these reformatory thinkers or reformed Christian thinkers like Martin Luther, Calvin and Zwingli questioned the authority of Pope. For example, Luther's theological statements, sola scriptura, it is scripture alone is authoritative, not the word of Pope. Faith alone, sola fide, faith alone saves, not indulgence. Sola gratia, God's grace alone can save one man or one woman. So those doctrines of Luther, welcomed by the people at Germany, and moreover, he translated the Bible into German language, and people found that the authority of the church was going away from the Bible and opposition arose against Pope in Germany. So in the same manner, in Switzerland and in Geneva, Zwingli and Calvin brought Reformation. Zwingli and Calvin accepted much of the teachings of Martin Luther, but however, slightly they were different from Martin Luther. So all these reformatory thinkers, foreigners, or the people who engage in reforming the church, they worked for the welfare of Christian church. And they brought Bible back to the church. Now they introduced preaching, singing in the church and the translation of Bible into local languages. So that was a positive contribution of Reformation. By seeing this, many people, those who followed Luther, became Lutheran Christians. And many Catholic Christians converted themselves into Protestant Christians. This term is not used now, and they became Reformed Christians. They were not Protestants, but they reformed Christian faith. As number increased and Reformed churches grew, now Pope of that time wanted to reform the Catholic Church. So what he did, he organized a council at Trent, that's called Council of Trent. So in the Council of Trent, Pope renewed Catholic Church and accepted some of the spiritual and scriptural teachings proposed by the reformatory thinkers. There were so many meetings took place to incorporate the outgoing Lutherans into the Catholic fold. For example, council at Worms, council at Ratisbon, and many dialogues, several dialogues took place. But they were very strong to practice their own religiosity other than the Latin form of Christian faith. So the Council of Trent between 1545 to 1565, the emperor wished the council deal primarily with practical matters to reform the church and make certain disciplinary concessions to the Lutherans. But Pope's wish was to renew the doctrinal and practical issues. The council teachings were framed and emphasis was given on the religious purity, and the decrees were carefully made to have dialogue with others, and scripture must be taken into consideration, and tradition also must be taken into consideration. So there were many rules and regulations were formulated in the Council of Trent, and disciplinary reform also took place. So Rome employed many bishops in the administration of the church, and disciplinary decrees became main source of this council, and the outcome was all the clergies must be well educated and they must lead an exemplary life witnessing Christian faith wherever they serve. So with that motto, the Reformation and Counter Reformation, or Reformation and reaction, took place in the history of Christianity. Thank you.